But you kept this, she whispered. I did, I said softly. Because one day, I knew you'd come back. And you'd need to remember not just him, but us, the family we were. For a long time, neither of us spoke. She sat there with the letter in her hands, her shoulders trembling. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Do you remember the last time we were all here together? I asked. She nodded slowly. The summer before he died. Yes, I said. He wasn't feeling well, but he wanted one last trip. You were 14, full of energy. You ran to the beach every morning before breakfast. She smiled faintly through her tears. And he'd shout after me, don't go too far. I laughed softly. He always worried. But he loved watching you run. That was his favorite thing, seeing you free, happy. Her smile faded. I barely remember that summer. It feels like another life. It was, I said quietly. But it's still here, in these walls. In the air, in the light. That's what your father wanted you to know. We spent the rest of the morning going through the box. There were sketches Daniel had made, the blueprint of the house. A note about how he chose the color of the walls, like sea foam. So it always feels like morning, and a little list of dreams he'd written for us. One note said, promise May that no matter what happens, she'll never sell this place. It's our anchor. When Emily read that, she froze. She looked up at me, guilt and realization flooding her eyes. Mom, I smiled gently. It's all right, darling. You didn't know. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have sold it without asking you first. I reached out and held her hand tightly. You were trying to help. You thought you were doing the right thing. But it's his wish, she whispered. And I almost broke it. I shook my head slowly. No, sweetheart. You didn't. You brought me back here. You gave me a chance to remember. That's all he ever wanted. After lunch, we took a walk to the beach. The sand was warm under our feet, and the wind carried the familiar scent of salt and sun. Emily looked out at the horizon, her hair blowing wildly. It's beautiful here, she said softly. I forgot how peaceful it feels. I smiled. That's why your father loved it. He said the sea always listens, even when no one else does. She nodded, lost in thought. Then she said quietly, Mom, I don't think I can sell it anymore. I looked at her, my heart swelling with quiet relief. What changed your mind? She glanced at the waves. Because it's part of us. And because I think Dad would want my kids to know this place too. Her words brought tears to my eyes. I reached out and touched her cheek. He'd be so proud of you, Emily. We sat down on the sand for a while. Just listening to the sea. I could feel Daniel's presence somehow, not as a ghost, but as a warmth between us. It was the same warmth that had filled this place when we first built it. After a long silence, Emily turned to me. Mom, there's something I need to tell you too. I looked at her, curious. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. When I started planning to sell the house, it wasn't just about money or repairs. It was because I felt disconnected from you. From Dad. From who we used to be. I thought maybe if I let go of this place, I could stop feeling guilty. Guilty? I asked softly. For what? For not being there for you after Dad died, she said, her voice breaking. You were alone, and I was so angry at the world. I couldn't bear being near anything that reminded me of him, even you. I thought if I kept my distance, I could forget the pain. I took her hand. Oh, my sweet girl. You don't have to carry that guilt anymore. Grief makes us run in different directions, but it doesn't mean we stop loving each other. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. You have nothing to be sorry for. You came back. That's what matters. As we sat there, the tide began to rise, washing over our feet. The water was cool, soothing. For the first time in years, I felt light, as if something that had been buried deep inside me had finally found air. Emily whispered, "Do you think he can see us right now?" I smiled. "I don't think he ever stopped." She laughed softly, wiping her tears. "He'd probably tell us to stop crying and get back to fixing the fence." I laughed too. That sounds exactly like him. We stayed on the beach until the sun began to set, turning the sky into shades of pink and gold. As we walked back to the house, I felt her hand slip into mine, just like when she was a child, inside. The air was warm and gentle. Emily went to the study again, looking through her father's things with a softer heart this time. I watched her from the doorway, my chest full of something I couldn't quite name: pride, love, peace, maybe all of it together. Finally, she turned to me and said, "Mom, I want to restore the house. Not sell it. I'll take care of the repairs. We'll come here on weekends. The kids will love it." My heart swelled with quiet joy. "Are you sure, sweetheart? It's a lot of work." She smiled through her tears. "It's worth it. For him. For us." That night, I stood alone on the porch, watching the moon rise over the ocean. The waves glimmered under the silver light. I could almost hear Daniel's voice again, soft, content, whispering, "You did it, May. You kept our promise." I closed my eyes and whispered back, "No, we did. All of us." The sea breeze carried my words away, and I let them go, knowing they'd find him wherever he was. The morning after we decided to keep the house, something felt different. The air was lighter, almost hopeful. Even the sea outside seemed calmer, as if it too had been waiting for us to make peace. Emily woke up early and made coffee, her father's way. Strong and simple. I watched her moving around the kitchen, humming softly. For a moment, I saw her not as the busy woman she'd become, but as my little girl again, the one who used to climb onto the counter just to watch me stir pancake batter. She caught me smiling and raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "You just look at home." She laughed softly. "I guess I am." That was the first time I'd heard her say that in years. After breakfast, we started cleaning. The house had gathered layers of dust and time, and as we worked through each room, we discovered small memories tucked away, postcards from trips, seashells we'd collected, Daniel's old fishing hat still hanging by the door. Emily found one of her childhood drawings in the attic, a picture of the three of us holding hands by the sea, the sun smiling in the corner. She stared at it for a long time before whispering, "I can't believe this is still here." "Your father kept everything," I said gently. "He said one day you'd want to remember who you were." She smiled through tears. I think he was right. Later, we went into town for some supplies: wood polish, paint, and groceries. The same little coastal store was still there, though the owner had changed. An old man behind the counter greeted me with a grin. "You're May, aren't you? From the house down by the dunes?" I blinked, surprised. "Yes, I am. You remember?" "Of course," he said. "My father used to fix your husband's fishing gear. Good man, you're Daniel. Always talking about that beach house of his." I smiled warmly. He loved this place. When we left the store, Emily looked thoughtful. "Everyone here remembers Dad. It's like he's still part of this town." "He is," I said. "That's what happens when you build something with love, it leaves a trace that never really fades." We spent the rest of the afternoon painting the living room walls. The color Daniel had chosen all those years ago, soft seafoam green, had faded into a pale gray. Emily suggested keeping it the same. "It's part of the memory," she said. As the brush glided over the walls, I found myself remembering the first time Daniel painted this room. Emily had been only 5, sitting on the floor with her crayons while he worked. She'd accidentally drawn a little heart on the wall, and instead of scolding her, he'd painted around it, laughing. When I told Emily that story, she gasped. "Wait, where was it?" I pointed to the corner near the window. She ran over and scraped away a bit of the old paint, and there it was, faint but still visible. A tiny red heart beneath the layers. She covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling with tears. "Dad's still here," she whispered. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That evening, as the sun sank low over the horizon, we sat on the porch steps with cups of tea. The waves rolled in softly, brushing against the sand. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "I used to think letting go meant forgetting," she said quietly. "But now I think it means remembering without pain." I smiled. "That's wisdom your father would have been proud of." She chuckled softly. "You always say that." "Because it's true," I said. "He's still teaching us things, just in a quieter way." We sat there until the first stars appeared, wrapped in the sound of the ocean and the comfort of forgiveness. Over the next few days, we fixed what we could. Emily replaced broken tiles, I cleaned curtains, and together we repainted the porch railings. Every task felt like an act of healing, as if with every brush stroke and every nail, we were stitching something back together between us. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we'd work in silence, but even the silence felt full, not empty. Like before. At night, we'd cook simple meals, tell stories about Daniel, and laugh about old memories. It was strange how laughter could coexist with sadness, how both could fit inside the same moment without canceling each other out. One night, after the children had called to say goodnight, Emily turned to me and said, "Mom, do you ever regret not leaving this house earlier? After Dad died, everything was just as we'd left it, the couch covered in faded blue fabric, the shell-shaped lamp Daniel bought on our 10th anniversary, the old clock that had stopped years ago but still hung proudly on the wall. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture, tracing the outlines of memories. In the kitchen, I paused by the window where Daniel and I used to sit for coffee every morning. The cups were still there, a matching set, one chipped on the handle. Emily stood by the door, watching me. Her tone was gentle but firm when she finally spoke. "Mom, I know this is hard. But I promise, the family buying this place seems really nice. They have 2 little kids. They'll love it here." I nodded, still staring out the window. "That's good," I whispered. "Homes should have children's laughter in them." She smiled softly, relieved. I could see she was trying to do the right thing, trying to be practical, responsible. But she didn't know what this place really was, not yet. After a while, she went outside to make some calls. I stayed in the kitchen and made tea with the old kettle. The handle was loose, but it still worked. The sound of the boiling water filled the silence, a familiar rhythm that brought me back decades. When Emily returned, she found me sitting by the small dining table, staring at a photograph. It was a picture of her and Daniel on the beach. She was about 7, holding his hand and smiling at the camera. Emily frowned. "Where did you find that?" "In the drawer," I said. "Right where I left it." She looked at it for a moment, then sighed. "Mom, you should have taken these things with you when you moved. You left so much behind." I smiled faintly. "I didn't leave them behind, darling. I left them here. This house kept them safe." She didn't answer. She just sat across from me, her phone buzzing on the table between us. After tea, she started walking around, checking doors, looking at cracks, muttering things like, "The roof will need fixing," and "They'll probably repaint everything." I followed her quietly. But my eyes weren't on the walls, they were on her. On how grown up she looked. How far she'd come from that barefoot little girl running through the waves, when she reached Daniel's old study. She paused, the door was half open, she turned the handle slowly. And the smell of old paper and wood filled the air. I stood behind her, my heart heavy, inside the study. Everything was still in its place, his books, his old desk. The small model sailboat he'd been building before he died. Emily walked in and ran her hand over the desk. "I don't remember this room much," she said. "You weren't allowed in here often," I told her. "Your father used to call it his quiet room." She smiled faintly. "Yeah, that sounds like him." She looked around for a moment longer, then said, "Do you want me to pack these things up later? Maybe we can donate some of it." I felt a pang in my chest but nodded. "Let's see what we can keep first." She turned to leave, but as she did, something caught her eye, a small wooden box on the shelf. It was dusty, carved with little seashell patterns. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up. I froze. "That," I said quietly, "belongs to your father." She turned the box in her hands. "It's locked." "Yes," I said. "And it should stay that way for now." She frowned, curious. "Why? What's inside?" I looked at her, really looked at her. My grown daughter, so full of answers but still searching for understanding. "Some things," I said gently, "need to be opened at the right time." She laughed softly. "You're being mysterious again, Mom." I smiled. "Maybe. But mystery keeps memories alive." The day passed slowly. By late afternoon. The sun had turned the walls golden again. Just like it used to. Emily stepped outside to take another call. And I found myself alone in the house once more. I walked to the back porch, where Daniel and I used to sit after dinner, listening to the waves. The sea was calm that day, soft, shimmering, endless. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Daniel, I'm here." It felt like the wind answered, brushing gently across my cheek, carrying the faint scent of salt and pine. When I opened my eyes, I saw Emily standing in the doorway, watching me. She smiled a little. "You really loved it here, didn't you?" "I still do," I said. "But it's not the house I love, Emily. It's what it holds." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked toward the horizon, where the sun was slowly sinking. Then I said quietly, "You'll see tomorrow." That night, we decided to stay in the house. The electricity still worked somehow, though the lights flickered now and then. Emily set up her laptop at the table, busy with work emails. I made soup on the stove, just like I used to when she was little. When we sat down to eat, the silence between us was softer, not uncomfortable, just familiar. She looked around and said, "You know, I used to think this house was haunted." I chuckled. "Haunted? Why?" "Because every time we left, you'd whisper something to the walls. I thought you were talking to ghosts." I smiled. "I wasn't talking to ghosts, sweetheart. I was talking to memories." She laughed quietly. "You and your sentimental ways." We ate in silence for a while. Then, almost hesitantly, she said, "Mom, I didn't mean to hurt you by selling the house. I just thought it was what you'd want, less responsibility, less worry." I looked at her gently. "I know you meant well. You always do. But," she continued, her eyes softening, "being here now, I get it. It's hard to let go of something that holds so much of you." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Sometimes," I said, "we let go to move forward. But sometimes, we need to hold on a little longer, not for the place, but for what it taught us." She nodded slowly, blinking back tears. "Maybe," she whispered, "we can visit more often before the sale goes through." I smiled. "I'd like that." That night, after she went to bed in her old room, I sat by the living room window, looking out at the moonlight reflecting on the sea. I held Daniel's watch in my hand and listened to the stillness. "Tomorrow," I would tell her everything, about the secret that lived in this house. The one hidden behind a simple door that no one ever noticed, because before Daniel passed, he left something for her, something she had forgotten she ever needed, and I had kept it safe, right here, in the house she was ready to sell, the next morning. The house was wrapped in silence, only the sound of the waves outside filled the air, that steady, eternal rhythm that had always comforted me. Emily was still asleep when I slipped out of bed. I moved quietly through the hall, my footsteps creaking on the wooden floor. The light spilling through the curtains was soft and golden, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. I went into Daniel's old study, the smell of paper and cedar filled the air. Exactly as it always had. On the desk lay the small wooden box Emily had found yesterday. I brushed the dust off its surface with my hand, tracing the carvings Daniel had made years ago. Tiny seashells and waves, each one carved with care. I whispered, "You were always better with your hands than I ever was, my love." The lock was still intact, old and a little rusted. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a tiny brass key, one I had kept on my necklace for years. It clicked softly as it turned. Inside there were a few things: a bundle of old letters tied with blue ribbon, a photograph, and a small envelope with Emily's name written in Daniel's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I lifted the letters. I could almost hear his voice again, calm and deep, reading them to me by the fire. I smiled through tears. "You always knew she'd come back here, didn't you?" I tucked the box under my arm and walked to the living room. The sun had climbed higher now, painting the floor with light. I made some tea and sat down, waiting for Emily to wake up. It wasn't long before she appeared in the doorway. Still sleepy, her hair tied up loosely. "Morning, Mom," she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Morning, sweetheart," I replied, smiling. I made tea. She sat down across from me and wrapped her hands around the cup. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Better than I thought I would." There was a pause, the kind that stretches between two people who have so much to say but don't know where to start. Then I placed the wooden box on the table. Her eyes widened slightly. "Is that?" "Yes," I said softly. "Your father's box." She leaned forward. "You opened it?" "I did. Because it's time." Her hands hesitated above the lid, as if afraid to touch it. "What's in there?" I smiled gently. "Something your father wanted you to have. Something I think you're ready for now." She opened the box slowly, her breath catching when she saw the letters. "These are his," she whispered. "Yes. He wrote them before he passed," I said. "He wanted you to have them when you were ready to understand." She lifted the top letter and unfolded it carefully. Her eyes scanned the page, her lips moving silently as she read. After a moment, tears began to fill her eyes. "Mom," she said in a shaky voice, "he wrote about me. About the house. About you." I nodded. "He loved this place because it held all three of us. He believed that love doesn't end when people do, it just changes its shape." She wiped her cheeks, reading a few lines aloud. "If Emily ever forgets what this house means, remind her that it's not just wood and walls. It's where we learned what love sounds like when the waves are loud. It's where I first held her and promised her she'd always have a home, even if I'm not there." Her voice broke on the last words. She looked up at me, tears streaming freely now. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" I took a deep breath. "Because you were grieving too. You were so young when he passed. I didn't want to hold you back with my memories. I thought it was kinder to let you live your own life. When my daughter told me she had sold my beach house, I didn't say a word. I just stood there, holding the phone, listening to her voice fade in and out with the sound of the wind." She said it so casually, like she was talking about an old piece of furniture. "Something she didn't need anymore." "Mom," she said softly, "we're going tomorrow. I've sold your beach house. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Maybe she meant her beach house, or our old vacation spot. But then she continued, I found a buyer who's offering a good price. It's time to let go. Let go, those two words echoed in my head like waves crashing against rocks. The house she was talking about wasn't just a place by the sea. It was the one thing that still connected me to my late husband. Daniel. We built it together 40 years ago. Long before she was even born, every wall, every creaking floorboard carried a piece of our story, the story she came from. I didn't cry when she told me. I smiled instead. A small, tired smile, the kind you wear when your heart is breaking. But you don't want anyone to notice. I whispered, all right, sweetheart. If that's what you think is best. But when the call ended, I sat in the silence of my kitchen for a long, long time. The clock ticked on the wall. The kettle whistled softly outside, the evening sun poured through the curtains, painting everything gold, and I thought about how strange it is, how easily we can lose something we spent a lifetime holding on to. You see, that beach house was never just a building to me. It was where my life unfolded, the place where I became a wife, a mother, and eventually a widow. Daniel and I had found the land by accident. It was a small patch near the shore, tucked behind sand dunes and wild grass. The ocean was just a few steps away, and when the tide came in, you could hear it breathing, a deep, rhythmic hum that felt like the heartbeat of the world. He looked at me that day and said, May, this is where we'll grow old together. I laughed. On a windy beach with no neighbors and no stores nearby. He grinned. Exactly. And that's how it began, the dream that turned into a home. The house took almost a year to build. Daniel was stubborn about doing most of the work himself. I remember him covered in sawdust, measuring wood, drawing lines on the ground. I brought him lemonade and teased him about his messy hair. We didn't have much money. But we had time and loved. A kind of love that was steady, not the kind that shouts or flashes, but the kind that stays. When it was done, we stood by the porch and watched the first sunset together from our new home. Daniel put his arm around me and whispered, this will always be our safe place. He was right. For years, it was the one constant thing in our lives. We spent birthdays there, Christmas mornings, rainy Sundays, quiet nights. It was where our daughter, Emily, took her first steps, right there in the living room, chasing after the light coming from the sea-facing window. I can still hear her laughter echoing through the hallways. Life, as it often does, moved forward. Daniel's work took us back to the city, and Emily grew up faster than I could hold on to. The beach house became our retreat, a place we visited during holidays, whenever we needed to breathe again. But after Daniel passed away, I stopped going. For a long time, I couldn't. Every corner reminded me of him. His tools were still in the shed, his coat still hanging by the door. There were mornings when I'd wake up thinking I could still smell his aftershave in the hallway. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't hit all at once. It settles quietly, like dust, and before you know it, it covers everything. Years passed. Emily got married, had a family of her own. And I tried to stay out of the way. I sold our city house and moved into a small apartment near her place so I could see the grandchildren more often. I thought that would make things easier, to be close, to feel included. But slowly, I began to realize I was becoming more of a visitor than a mother. There were always plans, but not for me. Dinner nights turned into messages that said, maybe next week, Mom. The children started calling less often, and whenever I mentioned the beach house, Emily's tone would change, gentle, but distant. Mom, that place is too old. It's falling apart. You can't live there anymore. I would just nod, though she couldn't see me over the phone. Then one morning, she visited, holding her phone, looking a little nervous. She had that tone children use when they're about to say something their parents won't like. Mom, she began, I've been talking with a real estate agent. There's a family that wants to buy the beach house. They'll take good care of it. You won't have to worry about repairs anymore. I looked at her, searching for something in her face, maybe hesitation, maybe guilt. But all I saw was a kind of tired practicality. I said quietly, "You've already decided, haven't you?" She sighed. It doesn't make sense to keep it empty, Mom. You never go there anymore. The taxes, the maintenance, it's all too much. I wanted to tell her that some things aren't meant to make sense, that some places don't exist to be practical. They exist to keep memories safe, but I didn't. Instead, I just said, "All right, Emily. If that's what you think is best." And now, here we were, the night before she was going to hand over the keys. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside sounded like the ocean again. And I thought about Daniel. I imagined him standing on that porch, smiling at me, saying, "This will always be our safe place." I wondered what he'd think now, if he'd be disappointed in me for letting it go, or proud of me for staying calm. Around midnight, I got up and made some tea. The silence in the house felt heavy, and before I knew it, I found myself reaching for the old box in my closet, the one filled with letters, photos, and little pieces of our life by the sea. There was a picture of Emily as a child, building sandcastles with her father. Her hair was full of sand, her cheeks red from the sun. I remember how she used to say, "This is my castle, Mama. No one can take it away." I smiled through my tears and whispered, "You were wrong, baby. Someone just did." The next morning, I called Emily and told her I wanted to visit the house one last time. She hesitated but agreed. "We'll go tomorrow, Mom," she said. "Just for a few hours." When she said that, I felt something shift inside me, like the tide pulling back before a wave. I knew what I had to do. There was something she didn't know, something I had kept hidden all these years, not out of fear, but out of love. And tomorrow, when we'd walk through that front door together, she would finally understand, because that beach house wasn't just a home. It was a promise, and promises, they don't fade just because the paint does. The next morning, the world felt unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that sits on your chest, not peaceful, but heavy. I had packed a small bag the night before, a sweater, some sandwiches, a few old photos, and Daniel's watch. It hadn't ticked in years, but I still carried it with me. Somehow, it felt wrong to go back to the house without him. Emily arrived just before sunrise. She was wearing her usual city clothes, neat, pressed, and practical. The kind of clothes that say, "I have things to do." She greeted me with a quick hug, but her arms felt stiff, distracted. "Ready, Mom?" she asked, glancing at her phone as if the day already belonged to someone else. I smiled. "As ready as I'll ever be." We got into the car, and the drive began in silence. The road that led to the coast was still familiar to me, though I hadn't seen it in years. The same bends, the same stretches of open fields, but there were changes. 2 new houses, stores, signs every few miles. Emily would tap her phone screen, answering messages, scrolling through pictures. I didn't blame her. She had a busy life, a husband, 2 children, and a job that never seemed to end, but I couldn't help remembering when her attention used to belong entirely to me, when she'd sit in the passenger seat as a little girl, pointing at cows in the fields, asking me, "Are we there yet?" Now, I was the one silently asking that question. As we got closer to the shore, the smell of salt filled the air. It was faint at first, then stronger, that familiar blend of ocean and wind and memory. "Smells the same," I murmured. Emily looked up from her phone. The sea," I said softly. "It still smells the same." She smiled politely, not really understanding. "Yeah, I guess it does." I turned my gaze back to the window and whispered to myself, "Some things don't change." Not really. When we finally reached the house, my heart almost stopped. The paint was chipped, the shutters a little crooked. But it was still there, standing proudly against the backdrop of the endless blue sea. I felt a lump rise in my throat. It looked smaller than I remembered. But maybe that's what time does, it shrinks things. Softens the edges. Emily parked the car and stretched. Well, she said, here we are. I stepped out slowly, feeling the sand crunch beneath my shoes. The ocean breeze brushed my face, bringing tears to my eyes, the kind that come before you even realize you're crying. The front porch creaked as I climbed the steps. I ran my fingers along the railing. Daniel had built it himself. I could still see the marks where his hammer slipped one afternoon. He laughed about it and called it character. Mom, be careful, Emily said from behind me. The wood might be weak. I nodded, though I wanted to tell her that this porch had held us through storms stronger than time. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and sea salt. Sunlight streamed through the windows, scattering across the old wooden floor. It was like stepping into a photograph that had been waiting for me to come back. Mom, do you ever regret not leaving this house earlier? After Dad died? I thought for a moment before answering. No, I said softly. I think grief needs a place to rest. This house gave me that. It was my way of still talking to him. She nodded thoughtfully. And now? Now, I said, it's time to talk to you. She smiled, a little shyly. I'd like that. As the days passed, I began to notice something changing in Emily. She was slower now, not in the way of laziness, but in the way of someone learning to breathe again. Her phone stayed on the counter more often, her laughter came easier, and sometimes, she'd just stand by the window, staring at the sea the way her father used to point. One afternoon, she said, you know, I think I understand now why you never moved away from this place. It's not just about holding on to Dad. It's about remembering who you are when you strip everything else away. I looked at her with quiet pride. Exactly, sweetheart. She smiled. Then maybe I'll bring the kids here next weekend. Let them see what kind of world their grandfather built. My heart warmed. He'd love that. A week later, the children arrived, lively, curious. Full of questions, they ran through the house with squeals of delight, their little feet echoing across the floors. I hadn't heard that kind of sound in so long. It was like music. Emily watched them with tears in her eyes. You were right, she said softly. A home should have children's laughter in it. I smiled. And now it does again. The children found seashells, built sandcastles, and begged for stories about their grandfather. So I told them about how he built the porch, how he used to chase crabs along the shore, how he once painted the fence blue because he said it made the sea jealous. They giggled, wide-eyed and fascinated, and as I watched them, I realized something. Daniel's story hadn't ended. It was still being told. Through laughter and waves and tiny hands collecting shells. That night, after the children were asleep, Emily and I sat on the porch again. The sky was dark, sprinkled with stars. The sea shimmered under the moonlight. She turned to me and said, Mom, thank you for keeping this place, for keeping him alive for us. I reached for her hand. I didn't keep it just for him, Emily. I kept it for you. So you'd always have somewhere to come back to when life feels too loud. She squeezed my hand tightly. It feels like home again. It always was, I said softly. Before bed, I went into Daniel's study one last time that night. The wooden box was still on the desk, now open, the letters neatly stacked beside it. I took one out and reread a few lines. If you're reading this, my girls, it means time has done what it always does. It's moved on. But remember this, home isn't a place you live. It's the place that lives in you. I closed the letter gently. tears slipping down my cheeks. Then I whispered into the quiet room, "She understands now, Daniel. She finally does." The wind outside rustled the curtains, and I felt a kind of peace settle on my chest, deep and still, like the sea after a storm. The next morning, Emily made breakfast while the children played outside. I watched them through the window, their laughter floating on the breeze. "Mom," Emily called from the stove, "do you think Dad would have liked them?" I smiled. He would have adored them. Especially the way they both argue about who gets the bigger seashell. She laughed. "That does sound like him." We ate together at the same old table where Daniel and I once shared countless meals. The sunlight poured in through the same window, warming the room, and for the first time in many years, I didn't feel the ache of loss. I felt gratitude, for the love we'd had, for the family we'd built, and for the memories that refused to fade. That evening, before we left for the city, Emily said quietly, "Mom, I've been thinking. Maybe we should rename the house. Something that reminds us of him." I smiled. "What did you have in mind?" She looked out at the sea, thoughtful. "How about Promise Bay?" I felt tears rise again, not of sadness this time, but of something softer. "That's perfect," I whispered. "Because that's what this place always was, a promise." We stood there for a long moment, watching the waves, and in the distance, I could almost hear Daniel's laugh carried on the wind, light, content, eternal. It's been months since that summer by the beach, the one that changed everything. The house still stands, strong and quiet, facing the sea the way it always has, and though Emily and I now live back in the city, something inside me feels different. Lighter. Every time I close my eyes, I can still hear the sound of those waves, gentle, endless, whispering the same truth over and over, that love doesn't fade when people leave. It lingers. It transforms. It becomes part of the air, the laughter, the walls that once held it. Sometimes Emily calls me just to talk about the house. She'll say, "Mom, I went through the photos again. Remember the heart we found under the paint?" And I'll smile and say, "Yes, sweetheart. It's still there, waiting." She's been back a few times since then, sometimes with the children, sometimes alone. She says it helps her breathe, and I understand that now. That house, our house, became a bridge between who she was and who she's still becoming. I visit, too. Not as often as I used to, but enough to keep the dust off the memories. I sit on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the sea, and sometimes, when the wind shifts, I can almost hear Daniel's voice. He doesn't say much. Just small things, "Good job, May," or "She's doing fine now." And in those moments, I close my eyes and let the quiet wrap around me. It's not loneliness anymore, it's peace. One afternoon, I stood on the sand where the tide first reached my feet the day Daniel died. Back then, the sea felt endless and cruel. But that day, it felt different, soft, forgiving. I picked up a seashell and whispered, "We kept your promise, Daniel." We didn't let go, we just learned how to hold differently. And as the waves came and went, I realized something. Letting go isn't about forgetting what you loved. It's about carrying it in a way that doesn't hurt anymore. When I went back inside the house, I saw Emily's handwriting on the chalkboard near the kitchen, something she must have written on her last visit. It said, "Home is not the walls we live in, but the love we leave behind." I ran my fingers over the words and smiled, because that was exactly what Daniel had tried to teach us all those years ago, and finally, we understood. Now, whenever people ask me about the beach house, I tell them it's not just a place. It's a story. A story about a man who built a home from love, a mother who couldn't let go, and a daughter who almost forgot what home really meant. It's about time, forgiveness, and the way life always gives you one more chance to make things right, if you're brave enough to listen. And when they ask me if I ever think about selling it again, I smile and say, no. You can sell a house, but not the memories that live inside it. Sometimes, when the night is still, I take out Daniel's letter, the one he wrote for us before he passed. I don't need to read it anymore. I know every word by heart, but I still open it, just to feel his handwriting under my fingers. It's funny. I used to think grief was about missing someone, now I know it's about learning how to love them differently, and maybe that's the real secret of life. That love, once given, never disappears. It just finds a new home. As I sit here now, watching the horizon fade into gold, I whisper a small prayer, for Emily, for her children, for Daniel, and for anyone who's ever had to say goodbye to a place that meant everything. I hope they all learn what I did, that sometimes the things we lose aren't gone at all. They're just waiting quietly, like seashells beneath the sand, for us to come back and listen again. Soft piano fades in, and so, when people pass by that old beach house and see the name carved on the gate, Promise Bay, they smile. Even if they don't know the story behind it, but I do. It's our story. A story of love that stayed. A story of a house that never stopped being home. And if you ever find yourself by the sea, and you hear the waves whispering softly, maybe, just maybe, you'll hear it too, because love never leaves. It simply waits until you come home again.